everyone. We've got one more concurrent session left of today's agenda. Just a few housekeeping items as we kind of make this transition. I'll add these to the group chat, but obviously if you've made it this far, hopefully you've been using the participant agenda. There's lots of details in that doc. I will be discussing attendance at the end, so please don't stress out about that quite yet. We want to give Dr. Smith plenty of time to talk about his subject for this hour. If you haven't noticed already, I invoked the mute all. I'm so sorry, but some of our rooms have been up to or past 1,000 people. So we do ask that everybody remain muted and with their cameras turned off if possible, to minimize distractions, especially for those that are using our captioning and our ASL services. We will, for this hour, have a breakout conversation time as we've had in the past 2 concurrent sessions. During breakout conversation, I will remove that mute all function, and you are more than welcome in the breakout rooms to turn on your camera and your microphone to talk with other people. At this point, I will turn it over to Dr. Smith, and as he begins, I'll drop some of those notes into our chat box so you can review those and get settled. Thank you.
All right, hello everybody. I'm excited about this last session. I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen. Let's see. There we go. All right, great. So thanks so much for joining me in this last session. So after the keynote, my focus was on engagement, and now we get to connect over to assessment. And I'm excited to talk about this. And I know I just want to recognize, well, first of all, of course, the presentation is in Schoology. Sarah has shared that out. And I know overall, this is a very broad area. I know it can cover a lot of different things. And so I'm going to try to connect a few dots. I know I'm not going to connect all the dots, but I want to share with you a few things to get us thinking about when we're thinking about assessment. Now, I say assessment in the IEP. That's just only a fraction of what I'll talk about. I'm not sure about fraction, but we can incorporate everything I talk about into the IEP, but also assessment in general outside of just simply progress monitoring the goals and benchmarks we've identified. So with that said, I'll get started here. And, you know, I will start right off with this idea that we have, okay, some goals and benchmarks we've identified. We've identified them specifically in the IEP. We need to make certain that we're making progress towards those. Now, in this new reality, we may have planned for elements of that based on the fact that we'll be in hybrid or blended or fully online. So we might be looking to some of these tools already. But my mind immediately goes to, okay, if we're assessing in a blended hybrid fully online, then some of the considerations I need to have is, first of all, what is available in my content management system to collect some of this data. Now, it may be in addition to other data that we'll collect via face-to-face observation, be it over Zoom in terms of some of our connections, and a number of other formats. But our content management systems, if we're using some of those tools, there's an automaticity in some of that formative assessment that could be part of our overall assessment solution. That, to me, as I mentioned in the keynote, is one of our silver linings. So many of us have used something, let's say, like IXL or Alex or Khan Academy. They have assessment tools in there. Now, I know some folks will say, but I don't know who did it. I'm worried about someone helping them. And there's a list of other things. Now, there's some strategies that folks have talked about in the past to deal with those. Everything from maybe having the child do it when you're observing, maybe a videotape in terms of when they're doing it. There's a host of other things you could do from an observational standpoint to make sure it's them doing it. My reinforcement is more along the lines of this is in addition to other assessments, but the automaticity will mean potentially for the learner, limited, it's very efficient. They're doing this already. They're doing this for practice. They're doing this for an understanding of where they are. For us, we have the same value, and then of course we have those data elements. And I apologize, I'm trying to describe it and also answer, problematic questions at the same time, it's probably not the best strategy on my part. Number two, of course, is our learning management systems. So Google Classroom, Blackboard, PowerSchool, Seesaw. Many of these have also tools where we can create formative assessments. And as I've mentioned earlier, I can create these assessments, and Google Forms is a good example, with video, with images, with audio, with a number of other ways to ask that question. I could use EduCreations and other tools like that that have embedded quizzes and embedded questions as well. I can use Nearpod and Kahoots and things of that nature, but almost all these tools have a dashboard element as well, meaning I've collected it, and then of course I can see how they're doing. So here's an IXL example, and I'll show a dashboard in just a second that I want to reinforce. But of course, I have everything from multiple choice to different content areas to other ways of assessing besides just true and false and essay, etc. And then what I have here is that dashboard. And that dashboard allows me to, allows me to see how that student's doing against themselves, against others, depending upon the system I'm using. So that could be very helpful in addition to other ways of collecting data for progress monitoring or curriculum-based measurement or assessment. So I'd urge you to consider that for the validity, the efficiency, and the effectiveness. Now, by the way, there are, as I mentioned before, Google Forms allows me to do this in a variety of ways. And I think I have a link here. Nope, I don't have a link here. I have it later on. There's a link, 81 ways of using Google Forms for assessment. And if it's not here, it's in my links under the folder. But anyways, wants to reinforce in our learning management systems, that to me is a tool to get used to, whatever learning management system I'm using that has the ability to create quizzes. And again, being able to operationalize that. Now, with that said, there are a number of tools out there that collect electronically progress monitoring data. And now these would these are very much aligned with more of my goals and benchmarks specifically to an IEP. If you're unfamiliar with this tool, the National Center on Intensive Intervention has created this academic progress tool. And basically the tool is, for lack of better words, a consumer reports to allow you to identify what assessment tools are out there. So for example, let's say I'm looking in the area of elementary, I'm looking in the area of reading, and I'm going to apply those filters. And what they've created is, first of all, a list, and of course, Ames, Web, and if I scroll down here, I'll get to Dibbles and other things like that. So there's a whole list of things I can take a look at. And with that, what they've done is they've offered a legend here to what these things mean in the area of performance level standards, of growth standards, and of usability. So it's walked you through, first of all, what assessments are out there, how they perform to level standards, growth standards, and then usability. I'm not using this tool for assessment. I'm using this tool to find assessments that might align nicely with progress monitoring tools affiliated with goals and benchmarks. So I'm mentioning it for that. Now, I do want to give you an illustration of a tool that if you're interested in, you just simply need to email me. And this is in the area of writing, particularly at the middle school level. But this is just an example as we go more to hybrid, blended, or fully online, identifying these resources and then utilizing them to get at data. And again, this to me is just general data. Yes, I could affiliate with a goal benchmark, but it's also data that, one, I'll understand better how the student's performing. Two, the student is seeing how they're going. And of course, that's an engagement aspect, and the list goes on. So let me go ahead and I'm going to escape out of here. I don't know what's happening with my system. So there we go. I'm going to escape out of here, and I'm actually going to open up a new window. And there we go, Start Paw. Now, Start Paw, I need to give you access to, but let me give you an example of what it is. Start Paw created a tool, and we'll go ahead and sign in here. and we'll grab a student and we'll just say, okay, so StartPaw allows teachers to create a classroom. And so again, my illustration is not so much for this as it is these digital tools that allow teachers to create a classroom. So I'm gonna create a classroom here. And we've used lots of different things, Nearpod, Kahoots, etc., Quizlet. And so what happens here is the student will be given in this system a writing prompt, okay? Now these are actually directions. So here we
Today,
go.
you are going to write a short story. On the next page, you will see the first sentence of the story. You will then have 1 minute to think about the story, followed by 3 minutes to write it. Click Start when you are ready.
All right, so those directions are there. They can read them or audio. So I'm gonna click Start now. And now there's an automatic timer in this system. There's the prompt in blue, and of course the directions in black. I can listen to both those, and then of course, get engaged in it. So let's wait for a few seconds here, because what I wanna do is I wanted you to see how a text box opens up, and then the students given 3 minutes to write. But then I wanna show you how the teacher can take a look at the data based on that. And so this is just an example of a number of digital tools out there for teachers to use with their students for just regular data collection on progress monitoring, curriculum-based measures, etc., on a variety of different areas. Again, I'm going to look to my content management system and my learning management system for some of these tools right off the bat, as well as some of the other websites I'm using that have some sort of curriculum. They might have an assessment feature as well. So here we go. All right, it pops up. So there's my prompt, and there's my text box, and I can type away in here, and here's my timer. So after 3 minutes, it'll automatically time. Okay, so now I'm gonna go back here real quick. Yes, I wanna leave this. And I'm gonna go to the educator version. And inside the educator version, I always forget, I think I wanna take a look at monitor and paw and reports. Yep, there we go. And now I can go up and take a look at the student. So this is the class of students and how they performed on a specific intervention. So it looks like 3 students were 25th percentile and below. And so for me, or actually let's go with the 6 students that were 50th percentile or below. And this was, I think, for narrative. And so I can look at this from a narrative, expository, or argumentative. These 4 students, 5 students, 9 students, okay, they're moving along, but I want to find out who these students are and how they're doing. So of course I could take a look at that in terms of my structure, but also I could look at an individual. So here's an individual, and let's go back to the year. It looks like there's 3 data points. I could see the actual writing on this data point. I could click here and see what the student wrote. And of course, the number of letters, correctly spelled, sequence, number of words, and that's all it's offering here. And you may say it's not enough. Well, again, this is just an example. But I offer this example because an example like this, I can see the writing. Well, first of all, the prompts are given, the writing's done, automatically scored, compared to others. And then, of course, I can see what the individual's doing. And then, of course, the power of data walks, etc. And we'll get to that here in just a bit. But in terms of the students using data, and here's where we'll get to it, is that if they have access to this type of data, the data walks are powerful. And by the way, if you're unfamiliar with the power of data walks, here's a link to a resource right off the Google Doc that is several, but this is one of the reasons I liked it is it has some text about using data to engage learners, but also there's some nice videos of teachers walking you through how they use data sets to help their students. And many of these actually are paper-based. They aren't necessarily digital, but how it empowers the learner. I think these are middle schoolers that they're working it with. But anyways, data is a fairly powerful tool, and data walks are fairly powerful for our learners. And of course, that type of data that I just shared in StartPaw for writing, I could share with my parents, I could share with other teachers. And the beauty of it for the blended, hybrid, or fully online is the nature of the student could be doing it at home. They get their prompt, they get 3 minutes to write. There they go. and then it automatically scored for me. I'm not having to score it. I'm taking a look at the data, making decisions. Now, of course, that writing element for StartPaw is just one set of a set of data. I'm probably asking them to write other ways. I might be asking them to outline. So it's just a combination of. Okay, so that's one element I just can't reinforce enough. Find some of these digital tools that are automatically offering assessments, correcting assessments, and recording them, and then use them in combination with some of the other things you're doing that allow you to have a better sense of what the learner's doing, better sense of what you need to do to an adjustment, and your overall planning and design of your instruction. All right, so the other element here in terms of, okay, in terms of exams, there are a lot of different measures, okay? Now, I see things as kind of direct, indirect, and authentic, but we'll kind of jump around a bit in terms of what we're actually measuring. But that to me is critical, and we need to think about how we're measuring it. Because as this comic offers, is the fact that, well, they're all being asked to take the same exam, and that is basically climbing the tree, which of course the monkey's gonna do great, but I'm not, the bird's gonna do great, but they're not gonna climb actually, they're gonna fly. So the list goes on in terms of the limitations there. So I'm of course gonna go back to my universal design for learning. If you're with me in the keynote, I reinforce that as my pathway to design. If you're with me in the engagement presentations, I built upon that and said, hey, engagement gives me a pathway, so why wouldn't I use this when I'm thinking of the options for students to be able to share what they know and the digital tools that can facilitate it. And I'm gonna give you some illustrations here in just a second. But the big thing is, I'm gonna use it from a perspective of UDL, because what I wanna do is I wanna build them up. I wanna give them options. I wanna give them options to express and communicate. And overall, I want them to do this as independently as possible to be fairly self-determined. So with that in mind, oh, and by the way, again, if you were with me prior, there's a website that offers a great resource to break down each of these elements. So physical action, expression, communication, and executive functions. And I thought I'd link to it. So I'm gonna actually get out of here real quick. And I don't have it, so let me go ahead and go to it real quick. UDO guidelines, and I will link to it in the presentation where you're looking at. But FYI, I can go into action expression, and under action expression, I can get this table, and it's all interactive. And so if I want to use multimedia for communication, here's some ideas, okay? Not a laundry list, but some ideas. If I want to build fluency with graduated levels of support, here's some additional ideas. I'm going to share with you a tool that does that actually in just a few minutes. So these are just aligned to UDL, particularly action and expression. And you know what, folks? I'm going to do this right here. I'm going to go ahead and link on this, and we'll link it, and we'll go ahead and hyperlink it all together. So if you're with me now, you just need to refresh, and it's there. Okay, so for me, the way universal design for learning and the multiple options get me thinking about digital, hybrid, blended online assessments is something similar to this. Now, think of this as our phone, or the image is actually an old GPS system. We created this several years ago, so it's a bit outdated, but the idea still stays the same. And that is, we need to think about the options we're going to do for assessments, not only for the digital purpose, but also for the purpose overall. And that is here, if we look at a traditional route, we're asking students to write a descriptive essay about Greek mythology. Great, okay. Well, the traditional route is there's a point A where the student is, and we want them to get to point B. All right, that's our GPS example or our phone example in terms of moving along. Well, what's the big deal? Okay, that's all good. Well, the big deal is we're actually asking the student to write. It's a single route. And from my perspective, especially the work I've done in writing, I'd argue we're actually assessing two different things here, and maybe not doing a good job with the latter. And that is, the first thing we're doing is we're assessing their ability to write. And that would be the mechanics, organization, the vocabulary they use, and everything else that goes into, well, the 6 traits of writing as well as other elements of writing. The second thing we're assessing is their knowledge about Greek mythology. which will be hampered by their ability to write. And so if they're not a fluent writer, their ability to share this, especially if it's within a time limitation, will therefore limit their ability to share about Greek mythology. So from a digital option perspective or from a UDL perspective, of course, I'm going to get rid of write, and I'm going to ask you to demonstrate your knowledge. And by demonstrating your knowledge about Greek mythology, I'm no longer assessing writing, I'm assessing the Greek mythology. Now, special educators would say, of course, that's what we're trying to get to. Now, others of us may say, no, writing's really critical. We need to assess writing. Well, great. I just showed you a tool that assesses writing. They have content neutral prompts that are basically trying to assess, can you write to narrative, expository, and argumentative? It has nothing to do with the content. It has to do with your writing. So let's assess writing for writing's sake, and then assess the knowledge for knowledge's sake. Now, writing could be part of that, but again, for some individuals, they need multiple routes. So they may need to present it. They may need to give a visual image. They may need to do a narration. They may need to do a video. And that's why we want to use some of these options and know about these options and plan for those when we think about assessment. So I know many of us are already there, but I wanted to reinforce it. And UDL offers me an example and a pathway to get there. Now, the trick oftentimes, or the challenge oftentimes, is the fact that, well, wait a minute here. If I give them lots of options, how do I not go crazy scoring all those options and giving that critical feedback that's so necessary to engage them? Because I need to get them feedback, and I need to give them pretty immediate feedback. Well, this is where rubrics fall into play. And to me, rubrics are critical for blended, hybrid, fully online learning. Why? Well, for several different reasons. So first of all, they offer a roadmap. Rubrics offer the learner where they're trying to get to. It's better be explicit. It better tell you the versions, like you can get, you can go kind of first class. This is the most points you can get. You can get by and still be competent, and here barely competent. And by the way, if you do it this poorly, poor points, and by the way, you'll need to redo it. I mean, our rubric is giving that map. It's telling explicitly what's expected. So, and of course, rubrics come in different ways. Well, I was going to share with you an example there, but I must not put, oh, here, that's what I was trying to share. It provides teachers an expectation. It provides the teacher expectation. So why is it so critical, hybrid, blended, and fully online? This is the type of thing where I may get questions face-to-face. I may need to review face-to-face. There may be 100 different things going on. So I'm actually giving you a roadmap. I'm telling you my expectations. I'm defining what the deliverables are. I'm not saying it has to be a presentation versus an essay. I'm saying I want you to demonstrate Greek mythology. These are the components you need to demonstrate. It offers a continuum, as I mentioned a moment ago, with what I can accept. Of course, there's points affiliated with it. And it breaks the assignment down in parts. So one part may be content, another part might be the way you organize it, another part might be the way you present it, another, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so that way it also allows individuals to focus in on those areas versus, well, I shared my knowledge, yeah, but there's other components that we're trying to build as well, like your organization skill, like your ability to structure, like your ability to do some analysis, like your ability to make sure it's a professional looking or polish. Those are all elements we can place into a rubric. And so these are critical components and why I would urge us to consider using a rubric with blended or hybrid learning. Now, rubrics can look like all sorts of things. They could have your normal text, they could have pictures, they could have images, they could have line drawings, you name it, to be able to facilitate where we're trying to get at. Now, with that said, there's a number of different links I've identified for you, including things to actually create rubrics. So for example, this offers the fundamentals of rubrics. And then the fundamentals of rubrics is actually a bit dry, but it kind of walks you through the step-by-step of what you want to do with the rubrics, the purpose of creating rubrics in a certain manner, et cetera, et cetera. So I'd highly recommend taking a look at it. Now, if you're looking for something more practical, you want actually something that creates rubrics, well, here's RubyStar. RubyStar has been out there for years. Yeah, it's actually created here at the University of Kansas. It hasn't been updated in a while, but what it does have is I want to create an oral projects rubric, or a rubric for reading in terms of comprehension, or rubrics in terms of the basics of writing. You can click on any of these areas and it offers a template, a pre-made template that you can modify the language, you can modify the focus, you can modify the points, but it gives you the template and it gives you all the segments that if that's what you want to do, you have it already done, you click create and it creates it for you. So it's a pretty nifty idea, and that's RubyStar amongst other rubric creators. So there's Rubric Maker, there's a list of rubric creators out there. So a lot of different types of tools to create your own rubrics to make it easier for yourself, if that is of interest, okay? So FYI in terms of creating your rubrics there. Now I continued on in terms of some other ones, in terms of creating, why, designing. I just wanted to emphasize if I'm gonna use rubrics, I wanted to give you some illustrations of how to create them. And again, these to me are gonna couple with many different things. It's gonna couple with the design I can utilize. It's gonna couple with the way I can measure. It's gonna couple with the hybrid and blended and online for that flexibility, the direction, the independence, the list goes on. All right, so with that said, I'm gonna look at video if I get to have rubrics. And video, why? Because video is so powerful from an engagement perspective. Sean, that was a previous presentation, I know, but it also allows me to really get at what I know. I think video has so much power because of what you can do prior to video. So first of all, let's have a little fun. I know we're all there. David even made reference to Schoolhouse Rock in his keynote. Let's illustrate Schoolhouse Rock, and feel free, folks, to sing along. Okay, here we go.
I'm just a bill, yes, I'm only a bill, and I'm sitting here on Capitol Hill. Well, it's a long, long journey to the capital city. All right, so enough there, okay? But I know some of you are like, yeah, that wasn't one of my favorites. Instead, it was this one.
As
Okay.
your body grows bigger, your mind must. Conjunction.
Conjunction, junction, what's your function?
I wish all your cameras were on because I bet you're dancing along with that, or at least moving along with it. Video is powerful, right? Video has a lot of mnemonics to it. Video can do a lot of different things. Okay, so we had a little fun with that. Actually, the news about Congress coming back into session to deal with the post office, they were talking about committees and how bills were, and I was like, oh, Schoolhouse Rock. But anyways, there's lots of different tools out there for our students to use to create the video, to illustrate what they know, right? Sure, lots of different tools. And so the question, of course, for us is what tools are we going to use? And by the way, as an aside, I can't reinforce this enough. While you and I might like a library of video tools to use, I would urge us to consider, in terms of any technology, find the technologies that you feel have the various features, supports, and components. Make sure the child is comfortable with this. And as we know with most children, except students with more extensive disabilities, but even those, if they get comfortable with a tool, let them run with that tool. Now, Nolan, he's worked with Movie Maker, and he actually, during high school, worked with Premiere, and he's a bit of an expert on when it comes to Premiere. This is a kid with an IQ below 70 and a lot of adaptive skill limitations. And yet he was able to master those two technologies with some practice. And so I'd urge us to consider what tools, make sure we're explicit with the introduction of those tools, and allow those individuals to be somewhat independent. A lot of fun too. Now with those tools, of course, there's editing tools. Oops. The editing tools here, Animoto, etc., are editing tools. All right, so I apologize, I'm jumping all over the place. I have some of these links off of the Google folder that link in terms of some of the video, not only tools to create videos, but also editing tools to edit video, which is necessary for some of our learners as they're creating what they're creating for their assessments. Okay, now I offered this up here, folks, just to reinforce video. Really, video is powerful. Well, actually, yes, it actually is very powerful. There's a cognitive theory of multimedia learning that shows that in the use of video, not only our use of video, but students creating their own, there's a lot of learning going on that gets into long-term memory. So that in and of itself, then producing the video gets that concept into long-term memory. I won't go over this visual, It'll probably put you to sleep if I'm not already doing that, but I wanted to reinforce there's some good evidence behind having students do it for this purpose. Now, what can we assess with video? Well, we can do everything from a virtual exit slip, okay? You just completed something, post a short flip grid, put it up there as a reflection. Awesome applesauce. I want you to explain that math problem that you're working through, explain everything. Please give me an audio narrative of the steps you're taking, or maybe you're doing it on a Word document, or maybe you're drawing it in Word or Google presentation, or even Google Slides, whatever it may be, excuse me, Google Doc. But I want you to audio and video record that so I can get into your head as you're completing that. I want you to demonstrate a skill, and this skill is X, Y, or Z, and you're going to show me video proof of that. I want you to, in part of this writing process, to peer review what you're doing in terms of the students. One student's written in Google Doc. I want you to give me peer review commentary. And by the way, could you record your screen while you're doing that and just simply upload that into Google Classroom, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I want you to practice with vocabulary. I want you to show that you understand vocabulary. I want you to pronounce the vocabulary, articulate, fluency, stuttering. The list goes on. I want you to sing. You know, it goes on and on and on, and what I could record with video. Some won't require editing. Some will simply be turn on the camera, do it, and save it and post it. It'll be that simple, like a flip grid and things of that nature, but just a consideration. Now, my own son, as I mentioned earlier, has Down syndrome, Nolan. And Nolan, without the use of technology, particularly the idea of universal design for learning multiple means of expression, and the use of video, without that, he wouldn't have been successfully fully included. Let me give you a brief example. Way prior to the pandemic, way prior to any conversation about COVID, years ago, he's transitioning into middle school. And actually, I don't have an example of this. I have an example of another video. I apologize. But he's transitioning into middle school. He's leaving the wraparound services of elementary. They were believers of him in elementary. The middle school teachers are very skeptical. They're like, what? Who's this guy? I haven't had a kid with Down syndrome in general education. I literally had a teacher tell me that. Well, that same teacher was teaching social studies. And Nolan was doing, early on in the semester, he was working on the explorers. And the teacher was using primarily writing to assess. Worksheets, small essays, small paragraphs. And Nolan was bombing. Nolan couldn't convey himself in writing. It was the mechanics, it was the spelling, it was the typing skills, a host of other things. But he did understand it. And so over one weekend, we created a short 3-minute presentation and we screencasted it off of PowerPoint, and he didn't record his picture, he just recorded his voice, and he explained what Lewis and Clark was all about. When he finished that, he sent it in to the teacher, who was very skeptical of whether or not he had the abilities, and sure enough, she listens to it, and over the weekend, by Tuesday, she's emailing saying, oh my gosh, Nolan knows this stuff. So going forward, he was out in the pod for the next about 3 weeks. When the students were doing writing inside the classroom, he was out in the pod doing video. Well, by early October, mid to early October, all of a sudden he's joined by several of his peers out in the pod doing video as well. Next thing you know, by I think it was by Halloween, they're all back in the classroom because students are now being able to do all sorts of different things on a weekly basis to share what they know. It wasn't just worksheets and short sentences. I know many of us are already there, but I wanted to reinforce that power. So for example, maybe we want you to do a research report on some figure in the past. Well, why couldn't you do that as an interview? Or why couldn't you illustrate who that person was? Nolan did it with FDR. He did a presentation of a fireside chat. He was literally next to the fireside. He was offering his overview of what FDR would share during the Great Depression. So he was doing an analysis of the fireside chats as a fireside chat. You know, the only thing he got wrong, he decided to wear a sweater. So he's a bit Jimmy Carter, for those of us that remember Jimmy Carter, instead of this suit, but that's a whole nother issue. But he was able to do a number of different videos to share what he knew. Now, it wasn't just the video that was a critical component, okay? And by the way, he did everything from performance tasks to doing some outside science experiments to show in sports, to show proper technique. And these are all things we could do now in a hybrid, blended, fully online. Videotape yourself showing a proper technique of throwing that ball. So you can go out in the backyard and throw with whatever. The PE teacher wants to know, are you learning how to throw that properly? Which is generally a skill and a standard, things of that nature. Okay, so here's an example of a video that Nolan started to do in his freshman year in high school, and he continued doing this as a journalism class, but it was so much more. So he started a journalism class in his high school career, and journalism at that time was a great place to place students with disabilities. And what I found out about 2 months in was the reason they loved that class was because it had 2 big rooms and students were in and out, and it was a great place for kids with disabilities just to go and kind of hang with their parents. It was safe. No, 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 no. And so when we pushed back on that, we realized, wait, the journalism students write and take pictures, and Nolan, we don't want to trust them with a camera, and that was a whole nother issue, and the writing part. Well, we started saying, well, what about video? And by the way, he'd been doing something called Strolling with Nolan. That's a whole nother story. I don't have the time for that right now. But what he did was he basically created these scenarios, these interviews that he then posted up on the website of the high school with the other the articles that they were writing for what was called the bulletin. So here's a brief example.
Hi, this is your reporter, Nolan Smith. I'm here today with a new broadcast series called Strolling with Nolan. On the show, I'm going to talk with people all over LHS about a variety of topics, asking them questions while we take a walk together. Today, we'll be speaking with LHS parent educators about their experiences working with students. Now, it's time to stay tuned to Strolling with Nolan.
There he is, a cool man. Now, by the way, he's working with a speech and language pathologist on this as well. So this is the type of thing that we could integrate in a variety of different ways: content, speech and language. But more importantly for me is the fact that, well, wait a minute here. He needed to learn how to use certain tools to capture, edit, display. And by the way, I have a link here, and if you'd like, if this was a little bit more interactive, I'd give you some time. But if you wanted to share, and I'll figure out what slide I'm on. Let's see, I'm on slide 35. If you wanted to share, feel free to share the type of tools you use and what's worked well for you. If you'd like to, no need to, but if you'd like to, it would be a way of kind of mass sharing about the tools. But that's not where I want to go, even though it's very, very helpful, very, very helpful. But folks, before he could create the video, Nolan had to do the following. Nolan had to organize the video. He had to outline it. He had to plan it. He had to work with the script. So this was very much a organization, structuring, brainstorming, sequencing, drafting before the video, but not having to write the full essay. So a lot of those skills we want. Now, these are things from a hybrid, blended, fully online. We could use some of these digital tools to facilitate some of that independent work and incrementally share what they know. So these are things that they could be doing at home. And by the way, if we use the right tool, it could be fairly engaging. So for example, comics. There's a lot of comics out there. One that I like is make-believe comics. Why? It's free, lots of different languages, easy to use, et cetera, et cetera. And so basically, let's go ahead and I'm going to start over, okay? And it has up to 18 panels. And by the way, there's lots of comics out there, both websites and apps. So this is where we could ask students to, again, organize their thoughts in a sequence, et cetera. So let's go ahead and let's just start with, let's start with backgrounds. And again, this is free, so we're going to be somewhat limited. Let's go ahead and select, I don't know. Let's go back over here and select the sea, okay? So there you go. And then over here, we could select the land. Over here, we could select the room. So I can change my backgrounds, right? And you're like, well, can you upload your own? Well, there's other sites out there that allow you to upload your own. Some are free, some are for pay, some are apps. So it depends upon the purpose and what you're looking for. Right now, I want them to be able to organize what they're thinking. And so now I want you to kind of give me some ideas in scripting wise. And so let's go ahead and select a person. And I kind of like this young lady because this young lady gives me 4 different emotions. She's happy, maybe she's a little anxious, sad, angry. Let's get her angry. She's angry. I'm not sure what she's angry about, but she's angry. And so now I can scale it. And so I can scale this to make her a little bit smaller. She's angry because she's in the water. Now let's get her out of the water. So we'll go ahead and move her out of the water. Oh, and by the way, we can flip her. So now she's looking the other way, and a list of things goes on. And so of course, I can go back over here, select another character, et cetera, et cetera. But I also want her saying something, or maybe I want her, you know what, I want her thinking something. So let's make it small here, and we'll put it up here, and we can type in the words. So type in words, and those are things that she's thinking about. So these are things, and these are tools that I would urge us to consider to help with our ability to understand what the student wants to demonstrate. And by the way, this is one of several. So another tool I've shared with you is Storyboard That. Storyboard That is much more intensive. It offers lots of additional tools. There's a freemium element. There's some elements that are free, and then there's things for pay. So I'll just give an illustration of, I don't want to upgrade now, so thank you. I just want to create my own. Come on, where am I? I don't want to create my assignment. Here we go. Okay, so similar to Make Believe Comics, I have my panels, but it's much more robust. So for example, in my school backgrounds, I could have a classroom, right? I could have, over here, I could have a bus. I could have the focus of the beginning of the building. And then I can select my characters. And inside my characters, I could grab a teacher, put her in the bus. I could, I'm not sure who this is. Maybe it's a, no, it's a teacher too with a tie. Of course, I can make them smaller. Oops, that was my, all right, you get what I'm talking about. Let's see, I can make this smaller. There you go, et cetera, et cetera. So then I could add in my own text. The list goes on. So depending upon the need, there's a variety of tools to consider. But to me, the big idea here is I get to organize what I'm trying to share. Now, let's continue here. I could organize via graphic organizers. So graphic organizers, yes, for the video, but just I want to web thoughts. I want to brainstorm thoughts. So instead of an outline, I'm going to use a visual here. And there's a number of digital tool visuals that allow me to create with supports, images, text that automatically connects things. The list goes on and on. So for example, Poplet. Some of you maybe use Poplet. Poplet allows me to go ahead and create a very basic one. And, oh, I don't want to sign up. That's right, I should have signed in, I apologize. Let me see if I can sign in real quick and share what I'm talking about. Oh, sign in with my Google, sorry. I thought I had this open, I apologize. But Poplet allows me to basically create with images here. I can create text here, so I can type in whatever I want. And then from that, I can add, and I can add here. Oops. Come on. I'll just add another here. I'll add another here. Not sure why I can't add there. Okay. But you know what? Now I don't want this to be black. I want this to be blue. I want this to be red or orange. I want this one. So now I can start organizing by color. And of course I can drag them around, et cetera, et cetera. There's my, what wasn't happening. These I'm going to organize by gray, et cetera, et cetera. I can add in images. And now I have a visual from someone to organize as well. And I could share this with my instructor, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a number of different graphic organizers to use as well. Now there's also, though, to be able to use technology to facilitate understanding, to demonstrate what I know, but do it in an organized way. And before I leave the webs, I want to share again, this is an organized structure. I could create the template, they could fill it out. They could create the template with the ideas they have and show the visual connections. The list of things goes on. Now, in addition, though, I could use tools like I mentioned comics, but also book creators and storybook creators. And the power of storybook creators, and if we have time, I'll pop over to one, but the power of story creators is the fact that there's a sequence to it. And then I can add in text and images. You know what? I'm gonna pop into one right now. Let me show you. All right. And so let's just go into Book Creator real quick. And Book Creator is a tool. It's a freemium. And so real quick here, Book Creator allows me to basically, where's my, here we go. Come on. Book Creator, where's my, I should have opened this up. Oh, there's my sign in. All right. So what Book Creator allows me to do is create a new book. And so therefore I can create it as a learner. So let's take a look at what the structure offers me. It gives me a blank page. And then as a learner, I have a sequence. I can import images. I can take pictures. I could write with my pen. I could type with my text. Let's go ahead and type the text. So first of all, I could type as I'm typing, or I could use speech to text. So now it's offering a multiple options here. So I'll go ahead and say done there. And then of course I can add in images and a variety of other aspects here. And then when I'm done with this page, here's the next page. So I can sequence my ideas. I can do it with writing, but I could also do it with images. I could do the writing speech to text, so I don't even need to type. Or as you saw down here, I could audio record. And so I could audio record ideas. And so when I send it to my teacher, they could click on it and listen to my ideas. Again, these are all options aligning to me with options for expression, and also they provided alignment to a rubric. Okay, so I'm gonna run out of time, so let me pop back over here and back to our presentation. So there's a host of things here that I'd like to just reinforce, and I don't have enough time. So I will go over here one more time though, before I pop back to the presentation. And just two brief things. If you're like, but Sean, we have to reinforce writing. Well, if we're not using under our Google tool, under our Google Docs, our voice typing, if we are not using speech to text, then we are limiting our learners in their ability to share what they know, period. This operation is giving our students more and more flexibility, period. It's not perfect, but as you can see, it will allow the student to be able to convey what they know in a speaking manner. Yes, it does require a level of articulation, but honestly, Alexa and others are improving that as we speak, meaning that the more and more our artificial intelligence gets used to that, the more and more that will be flexible. Many of us have already used Co-Writer, but of course, Co-Writer, as many of us know, will give us a list of words based on the letter we've started with. We can modify the word list. This has 9. Of course, in this example, tree, together, trust, those aren't showing up because this is the first word of a sentence, and therefore it gives you a list of words that begin with the letter T that of course would be at the beginning of a sentence. And of course I could select the B by just clicking on it, or I could select the boy, but just typing in the number. And so these tools allow for that flexibility and independence. It increases fluency. It gives me a word list. And by the way, I can change the word list to a vocabulary list in that I could have it on photosynthesis or ancient Egypt or whatever the topic is, the history of Lawrence, Kansas, and I could have my own word list in there. And so therefore, as I start typing with certain letters, like the letter L, Lawrence is gonna pop up. The letter K, Kansas will pop up. The likelihood of that happening in a normal word list is probably not too high, but because I added the vocabulary list, it will allow me to do that. If you're like, what, Sean? Go look at Co-Writer. Co-Writer is the application I'm looking at, by the way. Co-Writer, and just go and Google some videos. It'll walk you through all those different processes. And by the way, this is word prediction, and a lot of word prediction applications offer those options. So Co-Writer is one of several. And if you look for Co-Writer Universal, that's the app I was just using off the Chromebook. But there's Grammarly, Read Write that I offered earlier in the engagement presentation, offers speech to text and other functionalities as well. Okay, so these are some tools for writing. I was emphasizing the rubric in respect to video and options along those lines. But let's talk about formative assessment, because as I mentioned earlier, how that's so critical to facilitate. But I just want to hit this on the head, and I want to give you some suggestions, and then we'll have to call it a day. But first of all, you know, these formative assessments and blended hybrid online, as I mentioned, provides ongoing feedback, monitors student learning, data for both the student and the teacher and the adult at home. And this is motivating. This is ways to engage learners. If you're with me during the engagement, number 4 and number 5 on engagement is providing regular feedback, regular formative assessment is critical. Excuse me. Sorry about that. You know, regular formative assessment can also identify the strengths, where the challenges are. It allows students to independently target areas of work. And by the way, it gives you that independence and that level of engagement. Okay, and of course, it allows us to determine where, when, why they are, where we need to make an adjustment, especially if we're fully online, but also that blended hybrid if we're trying to foster that from afar. Okay, so what are some tools, okay? So basically, what I'm going to try to do is, all right, you know a little bit about formative assessment and the like. I want to share in terms of the technology. So here we go. So formative assessment overall, of course, one thing I would suggest would be limited or no point value for some of them. Use it to track the individual progress, for them to track it and for you to track it. It allows you to alter what you want to do. And then, of course, you can adapt and redesign. So that's one way. It also provides regular feedback. The student gets to see where they are. It can connect with other assessment that you're collecting. And of course, I mentioned that earlier. All right, so with that said, here's a few examples. Oh, and by the way, let me reinforce that. So first of all, we want to make the goals transparent so they know what they're looking at. We'd like to embed the assessment as part of instruction, and some of the tools I'm going to share with you allow you to do that. And it gives you feedback so the teacher knows what to do and the student knows what to do. So with that, there's a few tools to consider. So Playposa, I think it's Playposa. I never said it out loud. It works in Google Classroom. That's what I like about it. It allows videos with questions, and there's several tools that allow you to do this. Educreations allows you to do it as well. So as I'm engaged with the video, I then have questions for reflection. And they have templates to facilitate this. They call them bulbs. And of course, the videos you can actually create or you can grab from their library. I think it's called a library. And of course, it works with Google Classroom. It actually embeds in Google Classroom. So the nice thing here is it's interactive, allows for videos, it allows to be embedded in the instruction. And of course, it gives you the data, it gives you the dashboard, and allows for that student independence. Spiral is its own host platform for video. It allows videos with questions or questions with video, and it gives you an automatic scoring with a dashboard as well. Spiral, I think, is for pay. Those are limited charge with Spiral for pay. Not all of these are free, but these are formative assessment tools is what I wanted to reinforce. Pear Deck is basically, it connects with Google Slides, PowerPoint, even I'm blanking on Apple's version. It allows you to insert questions and polls and a variety of other things. And then that formative feedback is automatically polled. Therefore, you have a display of that. So it scores it, it displays it, and then, of course, shares the data with the teacher or the student. Everything from number of responses. And, oh, by the way, it does allow you to draw and allows you to do other elements in a way to assess. And then, of course, you'd have a value to that. So Pear Deck works primarily within slides that you create. So again, you can incorporate that in the instruction you're providing. Formative, it's a tool. You set up classes, and then you can customize assessments. You can use lots of different media. What I like about it is you can use whiteboards along with it, kind of like Explain Everything, if you saw that presentation. And of course, you can do a variety of question types, and many of these do the same. And again, automatically scores, has a dashboard, shows students both to teacher and data. You get an ongoing theme there. So Mentimeter is also simply, now this is free. It allows for 9 different types of formative assessments. including the media we talked about. I'm not sure if I don't think it allows that interactive whiteboard for drawing. And of course, the visual displays, like many of these, offer a variety of digital displays, particularly for student understanding. And they actually have this thing with word clouds. You have to see it to believe it in terms of this visual assessment. It's one of their 9 that kind of work with word clouds, but that's a whole nother component. And then Edulastic, it's a similar type of form of assessment, automatic grading. It has a library that offers items, assessments, things of that nature to consider. It might be a time saver for you in identifying some of these formative assessments. And I apologize to Libby or whoever is doing the signing right now. I picked up my pace because of time. I apologize. All right. And then, of course, I have here Edutopia. These are all pre-COVID links to, hey, here are formative assessment tools to use for students. There's several lists. Common Sense Media offers something. Edutopia talks about it. So I thought that might be helpful in some of your considerations. So that's another list for you as well. Yeah, okay, so, well, 5 minutes to go. Wow, gosh, I was worried about running out of time. I could have spent more time. So as I wrap things up, so we're gonna be done a few minutes early. I apologize not connecting it completely. I know I'm not giving you, oh gosh, use this assessment directly for the following purpose. But what I was trying to share is, first of all, there's a lot of tools out there in our content learning management systems that we need to maximize. There are tools out there in our learning management systems that we can create and make connections to. They almost all have a level of automaticity in scoring and dashboards for us to look at data and then make determinations on data. And so I started with that and I ended with that with the formative assessment tools that are outside the learning management systems. In between, I said, wait a minute here. You need to give options for learners, and an element of options for learners is critical. It's the rubric to be able to not only direct the learner, but to give options for scoring on the learner. Now that opens up lots of different digital tools. Of course, video to me is at my heart because of what I've seen with my son and so many other learners. But we can do books, we can do webs, we can do lots of different things that allow the individual, without having to write at a high level, still convey what they know, connect the dots, show the organization and structure that we require, but do so without the text component. And of course, the rubric would allow for that flexibility to score those multiple options. All right, so with that said, I'm going to stop.